Welcome to the Total Soccer Show, USMNT Weekly. On this here episode, we're nominating the players we think have the most to prove before the next international window. We're picking the players who've impressed us the most during their most recent outings, and we're answering some of your questions. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, Taylor Rocco's here. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. Good to be here. Lovely to see your shining face. It's very shiny today.
Oh, do I need to take care of that?
Your Botox is
it too shiny? Oh, no. Not again. It's very humid here in the Carolinas.
It's
Taylor.
a compliment, and it made him uncomfortable all at once.
You meant shiny sort of as an analogy for bravery and skill? Yeah?
Sure. That is exactly what I meant. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Good. Graham Ruffin's here. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. Talking of making you uncomfortable, if I told you there's 267 days until the first game of the World Cup, does that make you feel anxious or excited? Or nothing because you don't care about international soccer?
No, that makes me feel excited. The next international break is a little over 2 weeks away. That makes me feel anxious.
Okay, there we go. And then the one after that is another, 3 weeks. Great times.
Ryan, if you want to see/hear Graham be anxious and uncomfortable, I think it was the last Soccer 101 or maybe the one before just ended with me effusively praising Graham and talking about how wonderful he was and how much he meant to me, and it made him so uncomfortable that I just kept going with it. And it was nice because I got to tell him how I feel and also make him clench every part of his body that can be
I'm doing
all
now
at once. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow.
So everyone tell Graham how much he matters to you and then watch him
Don't do
be
that.
physically uncomfortable.
Hey, Graham, stop clenching.
Yeah.
No, can't now.
All right.
This is me for the whole
I
episode.
tried.
That's Joe Lowry, by the way. Hello, Joe.
Hey, I'm still stuck on the on Taylor saying that saying someone has a shiny face is a compliment. Is that what we're looking for?
Shiny, happy people.
Shininess?
The song that REM loved so much they didn't put it on their greatest hits album. Yeah.
Joe, there's a possibility what I meant to say was shining, but I went shiny, and then rather than correct it, here we are.
Ryan, you're looking awfully shiny today. No,
There we go.
it doesn't sound right to me. We tried.
Okay, I have to go now. Don't watch the YouTube, guys. We're on YouTube, but don't watch it, please. Don't like and smash subscribe, please. You can find us there if you do so wish, though. You can also find us at patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. That's where our bonus content can be found, including bonus episodes, including the one we're going to do straight after this, where we just compliment Graham for 15 minutes and see how it goes. Also, bonus video content and access to our Discord server. All the cool kids hanging out in there. Patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. A please and a thank you. All right. The next break, as noted a few moments ago, a little over 2 weeks away. Yay. 2 more weekends for USMNT players to put themselves in the shop window to raise their profiles for the international window. Joe, for this first part of the show, we should each nominate a player we think has the most to prove on their domestic game before the international window. Who's got the most to prove at the moment, Joe, in your view?
That's a really good idea, Ryan. Man, it's a good thing I prepped
Once again, came up
for
with it
that
by
exact
myself.
thing. Out of just hoping you might ask it. I think the player that has a lot to prove. I don't know if this is a player with the most to prove, but a player with a lot to prove ahead of next window is Yunus Musah. And we've learned some things about Yunus Musah since the last time we saw Yunus Musah with the U.S. We did not get to see him over the summer, and originally there was some confusion about why that was the case. Musah's come out and just said that he pulled a Christian Pulisic. He didn't say that word for word, but he said to the coaching staff that he needed a break after a long season. His body was beat up. He told ESPN that, quote, I needed that time off. Ultimately, it was to take that period off then so that I could be in good shape to be able to carry on now the whole season and give my best for club and the national team. So Musah doesn't play this summer, and he could have, and so that puts him a little bit behind the 8 ball. And he's not a shoo-in. We didn't see him in September. He wasn't called in for that roster, and he's not really playing a whole lot right now. And we know that that's something that Mauricio Pochettino values, is his players actually playing soccer. We don't see Gio Reyna even get a phone call from Mauricio Pochettino. We don't see Dortmund get a phone call, according to Doug McIntyre, from Pochettino and his staff this summer when he wasn't clearly going to be playing at the Club World Cup for Dortmund. U.S. Soccer didn't even pick up the phone to call Gio Reyna and see if maybe he could come in and they could work something out with Dortmund. Doug reported that they just skipped that whole process. It matters to Pochettino, it seems like, if you're playing or not. He threw a little bit of some dicey comments out about Tim Weah being stuck playing left back. Should have done that sooner, as it turns out, because that makes you score goals at the Bernabeu if your national team coach complains about you and then you get to play further forward and everything goes great. Yunus Musah is not a shoo-in for the USMNT roster at this stage. I think that Pochettino does like him. I think there's a reason why we saw Pochettino try to accommodate him back when he first took over with the U.S. and play him a little bit wider in a role that he thought would make Musa a bit more comfortable amid struggles with his club. But at this stage, I don't know what Pochettino thinks of Musa, and I don't know what Pochettino thinks of his midfield. So if you're Yunus Musa, the best way to make sure that you're a part of the U.S. roster and have a chance at the lineup moving forward is to start crushing it with Atalanta. And to Musa's credit, he made his debut for Atalanta over the weekend in a 4-1 win over Lecce. He came on for Martin de Roon. There's some real quality in that Atalanta double pivot. It's mostly been a 3-4-3 for them this season, so minutes are not going to be plentiful for Musa in central midfield. But he looked good. He looked fine. Lecce aren't a good team. Atalanta are a much better team. The game was already 4-0 by the time he enters the game. But he didn't do anything wrong, really, in that match. Maybe a little late on one of his deliveries. But in general, looked like the same dynamic, ball-progressing Musa that we've come to know and appreciate in the right context. But I think Musa is one of the guys that has a ton to show because he's not been around. Like, he's not been around for this U.S. group, and that is something that if he doesn't continue to impress and get more minutes, could continue to be the case for him.
Joe, I think it's a really compelling argument you've made there because he is kind of a conundrum with the U.S. at present. Because, as you said, like he comes in, he plays in this position, he plays in that position. We're not sure if he can play centrally under Pochettino. It feels like Pochettino values him initially and is trying to find a space for him and kind of carve out a role for him. And I'm not sure that was fully successful. Then he kind of takes the summer off, having played 1,000 fewer minutes than Christian Pulisic and a significant number fewer games than Pulisic, but very tired, I'm guessing. It feels like maybe it was just the club situation being uncertain. But it does feel like we tried him in some areas. We're not sure where he fits. Then he takes the summer off. Now we're definitely not sure where he fits. But maybe if he plays a bunch for Atalanta, it helps us understand how he could fit. It does lead to a lot of questions, and it does feel like he has a point to prove. It's a very good shout.
Yeah, very much so. And I think maybe Weston McKennie is going to get mentioned here in this category or not. We haven't seen each other's answers. I'm more intrigued about Musa's situation than McKennie's because I just have such a hard time imagining that McKennie's not going to play minutes for the U.S. Like, I can't really picture that yet. Now, Pochettino has challenged a lot of what I thought about this U.S. group already, so never say never. But Musa is a player that if things don't continue to progress from him in a positive way, and they are moving in the right direction for Musa right now, if that doesn't continue, I think there is a very real world in which he's not at the World Cup next summer. And I just can't bring myself to say that about McKennie just yet.
Yeah, okay. Graham, who was your nomination? Does it rhyme with Schmestem Blenny?
It does indeed, yeah.
Okay.
It does indeed.
I felt like pre-shots taken by Joe at Graham's selection. I'm not going to lie.
Preemptive shots.
I don't know who would select West of the Kitty.
Me, this guy.
Parentheses, you fool was implied there somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, it was implied. I got that. Yeah, I think it has to be Weston. Considering the reason I think it has to be Weston is we all had, speaking for myself, I had him at the top of my central midfield depth chart that we did last week. I don't think I was alone in that. There was surely Taylor or Joe, was surely one of you two had him like up there, certainly. Despite the fact he wasn't called up for the September window. And we don't truly know the reason for that. And I think it's probably best to ignore anything Poch says about it and anything, really, because he contradicts himself all the time. But it's clear that he's not happy with something, right? Whether that's the game time that he's getting or the position that he's playing for Juve. Or the worst case scenario might be that Poch has seen something from Weston in past camps that he doesn't like. I mean, Poch keeps on bringing up that March camp. He's not even being asked about it at this point, and he talks about that March camp. So he's hanging on to something from certain players, and it might be Weston. And the reason that's the worst case scenario is it's difficult for him to show for Juve something that Poch just doesn't like within his camp. But if it's something to do with the game time or the position or whatever, that is something that he can work on at club level. So it's up to Weston to make himself impossible to not call up, and you do that by being a key player for Juventus, which McKennie's already made real progress on in the last couple of games. It's happening again where he's on his way out in the summer and then somehow he plays 2,000 league minutes because he has started the last two games not in central midfield, notably. He's playing anywhere but central midfield. He played left wing back in that incredible game against Inter Milan, and then right wing back in that even more incredible game against Dortmund in the Champions League last night. But it's a start, at least, that he is.
Goals, but please go on.
That is true, yeah.
A lot of goals from 50 yards away that he had nothing to do with. Yeah. Okay.
I also thought he did a really decent job of keeping Denzel Dumfries under wraps at the weekend. I know they scored 3 goals. It's kind of contradictory. That's the same Denzel Dumfries who sort of tore the US to shreds at the last World Cup. So maybe if that happens, if we play the Netherlands again, we can get McKennie to do that job. But yeah, it seems to me there are other players who might be mentioned. Musa, I agree. In terms of his profile, I think he's quite unique for the US. I don't really see anyone else who's got that sort of ball carrying, ball progressing ability. So longer term up to the World Cup, yes, absolutely, he's got a point to prove. But if we're talking about from one window to the next, that's where McKennie rises to the top of my list here.
I think, Graham, I think I laid out that I disagree with that already. But one thing that I want to go back to in there is, it's funny what you said, and I kind of agree, about you can't really listen to anything Pochettino says. At the same time, I think there actually has been a lot of truth coming from Mauricio Pochettino. Whether or not I agree with the assessments he's making is a different story. But you talked about him citing March as this big thing. Well, March, he said that was going to be a change, and we've seen a bunch of change in the roster. Like, there have been clear through lines from what Pochettino has said and what his actions have been. I think the Weston McKennie case is one where we actually can listen to a little bit of what Pochettino is saying. I disagree with the decision that was made. I absolutely would have called Weston McKennie into this last camp. Like, we're going to get more out of Weston McKennie minutes than we are about Seb Berhalter minutes. That's just the reality. So I would not have had that same decision. But the thinking from Pochettino, I think, ties into another thing that he said recently in a press conference, which is he is going to call in fewer MLS players in October and November, and then he's going to bring back, presumably, this is now me adding on to what Poch said, but you'd have to get players from somewhere, presumably going to go and bring back some of the European guys, where I think in his mind, September, in the summer, was a lot about, hey, let's see what these MLS guys have to offer outside of a January camp. And now he can bring in sort of a little bit of both, but I don't imagine, to use Seb Berhalter again, that we would see Sebastian Berhalter next month because Vancouver are going to be in the thick of the race for the Shield and other trophies and all these things heading into the postseason. That feels like a guy that's purpose-built to not get the call so that you get someone like Weston McKennie back in camp. Again, that we're even having this discussion, I think is a little bit crazy, and that ties to Pochettino, but I think Weston McKennie is in that Balogun conversation of guys we just haven't seen as much as we thought under Pochettino, but when they come back into the fold, it's just so clear that they're going to have to be involved. There are reasons to be concerned about McKennie, as there always are, and yet somehow he always worms his way back in. I don't worry about McKennie, and I think this is actually a case where we can take Pochettino's comments at face value.
Taylor, do you have a nomination for a player who has the most to prove before the US regroup?
I do. Joe said McKennie always worms his way back in. I'm going to say he always hugs his way back in. He always vibes his way back in. He finds a way to get back into the good graces and become a key, valued member of the team, and I think he's going to do just that. But it is an interesting conversation to be had. Sound the klaxon, reset the counter. It's time to talk Gio Reyna, shall we? Because I think
reset the counter from what, 1 to 0?
From 0 to 0.
What an honor it's been, Taylor, to just give this mantle to you.
Yep.
Like, I just don't have the energy for it anymore. I'm just so happy to see it live on.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you. I didn't expect to be the person most excited about Gio Reyna, to be championing the Gio Reyna cause, and it is almost entirely fueled by the still image of him when he first joins Gladbach and he has to run through the tunnel, and they're kind of like, it's like the quote-unquote hazing thing where I think they're all just like cheering and clapping or whatever, but you can see him smiling and laughing the way you would expect a teenager / very young adult to be excited about joining a new team, and it was right there that I was like, oh, that's a real smile. That's like a genuine excitement and enthusiasm look from a person we have not seen that from ever.
It's because Joe Scally was at the end of the tunnel like this, arms out.
Just waiting to hug him. Yeah. Scally didn't play this weekend, was on the bench. We could talk about that if we want to. But I will say, Reyna joins Gladbach. It feels like is valued in the international window when he's not playing with the U.S., but is playing with Gladbach, plays some friendlies, starts this past weekend in a very, very bad game for Gladbach, but a good game for Gio Reyna. He was pretty clearly the focal point of their attack. He was the only one who was kind of able to try things and create things and get some dangerous shots off and create some dangerous looks. Since we discussed them last this weekend, they have sacked their manager.
Yeah.
We might get Pellegrino Matarazzo. That's the name that is most consistently linked. Who knows who will end up coming in there. But I think that makes the case for Gio Reyna even more interesting because now they have a new coach. Does that new coach like Gio? Does Gio respond to the new coach? Is he back on the bench? There are huge question marks that he is going to kind of have to sort out with his play sooner rather than later. And so I think there's an argument that like we need to see more from him than just by October. We need to see it from him over the course of the season and in March as well. But I think it starts now, and I think he definitely needs to keep a good start going, even with a new manager, even with a struggling Gladbach.
am I the only one who's slightly nervous about the managerial thing? Because
Not even a little bit.
Gerardo Sion, right? That's the Gladbach coach who was fired. We had enough evidence to know that he at least liked Gio now, which has been an issue for Gio in the past. Starts his first game at the weekend, plays one game, and then they've sacked the manager, which feels like rolling the dice again on Reina. So,
yeah,
man, I hope the next manager likes him.
Yeah, and I think that is like not even just like I hope the manager likes him, but oftentimes the manager coming in with a team that are in the relegation zone and weren't expected to be there, it's a firefight. And even if we're like this early into the season, there can still sometimes be that prioritization of defense. We're going to like shut up shop, close up shop. It's going to be, we're not going to concede any goals. We're not really going to focus on the attack. So we're only going to have a couple attackers. We're not going to play this young kid. We'll figure that out later. And that's been the case with Gio Reyna so many times at Dortmund. He's a problem they will figure out later once they deal with the present on fire crisis. Except that then there's a new present on fire crisis at Dortmund, and they never really are able to get around to dealing with the Reyna of it all. I very much hope that doesn't happen with Gladbach this time around. But I think it's another reason why the next month or so is going to be fascinating for him.
Yeah. We're just thinking about it all wrong with this managerial situation at Gladbach. The problem for Gio is that eventually every coach that he has doesn't like him anymore. So if you just change the coach after one game, every game, then it's going to be fine. So just go and hire somebody new every game of the season. Go from Matarazzo to whoever, right? Ten Hag's out of work. Like, just work your way down the list, and you're going to get a fully functioning, best-in-class Gio Reyna.
Gio Reyna sack boy.
Yeah.
That's what we need.
100%. Is he the anti-McKinney with that in mind then?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
McKinney keeps finding his way back. Gio Reyna keeps finding his way out.
Yep, 100%.
Wow. Why hasn't the club done like the Netflix of managers and just got a new one in each week? And
like the very UK coded reference. But Ryan, have I got news for you? Just a different host every week, or SNL would be a better American coded reference there. Yeah, let's SNL this thing up.
Let's consider it. Gio Reyna's next few opponents, by the way, at Leverkusen and then home to Eintracht Frankfurt. So challenging for Gladbach as well. Ruh-roh indeed. All right, very good. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to look at the standout performances from US players from the past weekend. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. It's good to have you, listener. We're now going to take a look at the players who did real good in their last outing. May I start, Graham, the bidding with Big Pat? Patrick Aguiman got an assist in, I believe, his debut for Derby, 1-0 win over West Brom, and by all accounts, very good performance from Big Pat.
So I didn't see much of his performance. I did see the assist, and I feel like I'm going to do the Joe Lowry bit here. Where am I thinking of the correct moment in the game?
Yes,
it's sort
you
of
are.
like a skiffed cross off his head, which, fair enough.
Directed header towards goal scorer.
Very intentional, cushioned pass off the dome, Graham.
And then I think the goal scorer from memory, I can't remember who scores the goal, but like kind of turns back on themselves and then does a lot of work themselves inside the box. But anyway, it's good to see Big Pat at least playing.
He was in the mixer, Graham. He got there for the goal, all right?
In the championship. Sure. Can I direct us to another Champo player who I definitely saw more of and have seen more of this season because he's played a lot more. I don't know if I'd say he put in a standout performance at the weekend, but had you right, scored a stoppage time equaliser for Coventry against Norwich. Josh Sargent's Norwich, by the way. It is... I'm going to broaden this out, by the way, but it's one of the ugliest goals you'll see all season. It's from about 2 yards. It kind of picks up a deflection, and Wright sort of like has to scoop it from behind him, so there's mitigation for why it looks ugly, but it's like 2 yards out. He should really finish it. But if Josh Sargent is getting a lot of attention for his form in the Champo right now, then Had You Right deserves some too, because he has now scored 6 goals in his last 5 games for Coventry. He is in the form of his life at the moment for a team that genuinely could be in the promotion picture this season. And he's playing as an out-and-out centre-forward, which is a change from last season when he got much of his game time on the wing. I actually don't know if that helps his national team chances if he's playing in that position. I feel like for the sake of options, it might be better to see him out on the wing. But anyway, he is performing. I will say he does seem to divide opinion within the Coventry support. I went looking for some forum posts and for some opinions from fans. Some seem to love him. Others point out that...
Some seem to really love him?
Some people, there's only 2 sides, that's it. No, they point out that Coventry are creating so many chances this season. And I went and looked at their numbers. They are second in the Champo for big chances this season. And against Norwich at the weekend, they should have been out of sight. Like, they create so many opportunities in that game. So the argument is like you could put anyone in that position and they would put numbers up. Nonetheless, he's doing well, and I think he's got better penalty box instincts than I realised before this season, and he's flying at the moment.
So I am in the weird position of like being excited and defending Gio Reyna. Ryan is in the not surprising position of defending Big Pat. Graham, it feels like over time you have come to be Haji Wright's biggest champion and supporter.
I love it.
Like, what made that happen? Was it just like the statistics? Was it just the goals scored? Was it one specific moment? How did you come to have the Haji Wright love that you currently have?
Maybe by accident, that old one. I've watched more of him over the last 12 months since he's been in the Championship than I would have anticipated, and I just feel like I've got a better grasp of what he is as a player now, and a lot of that is sort of like his physical attributes are impressive, and it's similar to Balogun. Like the moment of crystallisation for me in Balogun was the last window where I sort of recognised this is the job of being the number 9 for this US team right now, and similar to that, I look at what those attackers have to do for the US, and I think Haji Wright, with the way that he attacks open space and the way that he can get you up the pitch quickly, he's kind of not doing that for Coventry at the moment, so I'm sort of contradicting myself right now, but given what he was doing last season, he was performing that role for Coventry, and I just think he is a decent option for the US. I'm not suggesting he's a starting player or anything, but right now he would be in my roster for the World Cup, I think.
All right, good stuff. Taylor, your standout player from the weekend, who it be?
I love that this is the category because I think Graham was like, not exciting of a selection, and Ryan went for a scuffed assist, and I'm going for another player who I think, like, I don't think had any moments that made me be like, that's it, that's a difference maker, that's lights out. It just was comprehensively good, and that's James Sands for St. Pauli. They get the win this weekend. They've had an excellent start to their Bundesliga campaign. I believe their best ever start. They are certainly like top 6 in the table. I forget where they are exactly in the Bundesliga table. Someone can fact check that while I continue to talk. But he looked just very solid. He covered a lot of ground. I believe he won the most duels of anybody in the game. He kept it very simple in possession, but was always working to be a usable outlet and a useful outlet at that. So usually it would be 1 or 2 touch passes, but it was him having covered 15, 20 yards to be in a spot to receive that ball and then lay it off, or receive the ball for the wall pass. But then also occasionally would play some line-breaking passes. Did have a few, like, packing stat of 5 passes where he would split multiple defenders to play somebody in or to find somebody in space. And so I thought it was a varied passing game in a good way, but then a consistent game from his defensive performance and ground covered. And I think if you're Pochettino looking at that, he does give you more options as a defensive midfielder than you might have expected you might have. So I think it was a very strong, solid, if like unremarkable in some ways sort of performance from James Sands.
Yeah, he didn't come up in the first segment, but he was on my honorable mentions list that I have in my notes of other players that have a lot to prove between now and October, and still even after that, right? I don't think everything will be settled by the end of the October window roster-wise. Sands and Aiden Morris, who's not really been mentioned here, and Tanner Tessman and Johnny Cardoso, those guys feel like they're just in the big old hat, and you can reach into the hat and pick a couple of those names out, and they could be on a World Cup roster, right? Sands, we haven't seen under Pochettino so far. We've seen all 3 of those other players, so he seems to be at the bottom of that bucket. But Sands is a player who has been playing at a good level. St. Pauli are 4th in the Bundesliga right now. And more than that, they're a team that are controlling games with the ball quite a bit. I watched a good chunk of this game as well, Taylor. And Sands is playing in a double pivot in front of a back 3. He was ranging forward a little bit higher than we've seen from him throughout most of his career, but was in a team that was trying to keep possession. Now, that doesn't mean that Sands is an excellent in possession player. He's not still, even with some of the good things that he did in this game. But he's a player that's, I think, on that short list. And with more continued strong performances, works his way up higher and higher on Pochettino's depth chart based off of everything we know about Poch so far. The other thing that could play well for Sands, though I legit don't know if Poch will know this or will be able to go back and find it. He's played as a center back in a back 3 before, both for club and for country. That is something that after we see the back 3 against Japan, and could see that in some future games against other either back 3 setups or 3 forward fronts, that could be a little bit of a differentiator for someone like Sands compared to an Aiden Morris, who has not really played in a back line. Cardoso and Tessman, same category there. Tessman's the most rangy and forward kind of thinking player of that bunch. But Sands is a player who I think is helped by the shift to, at least the shift to being willing to use a back 3 in a way that maybe the other players in his rough competition aren't really helped by that.
Okay, very good. Joe, who's your pick?
My pick, I think is fun. I like this pick. It's Cole Campbell who comes off the bench. He makes his debut, the season debut, for Borussia Dortmund in the 74th minute of their 2-0 win over Heidenheim. Cole Campbell's a player that we've talked about quite a bit, although not as recently on the show. He's somebody that I think is maybe more in contention for the U20 World Cup coming up later this month, where he would be a starter for the U.S. should Dortmund release him. They could choose not to because it's a youth tournament. But he's a player who is very much a central figure for the U20 group at the moment and could be one to watch moving forward. I would be very surprised, not totally shocked, but surprised if we saw Cole Campbell work his way into the picture before the World Cup for the USMNT. But he had some nice stuff in this game. His best moment in this substitute cameo was in the 90th minute, where he's coming on, he's playing as a right winger. That is I think, probably his best role. He's kind of a tricky, dribbly 1v1 player. And he shows this really great sequence of beating the opposing fullback, the opposing left back, drives to the end line and cuts the ball back for Guirassy, who gets a shot out of it. That's who Cole Campbell can be. He can be a guy who, unlike most players in the U.S. pool, can beat a man and can play the final ball. Like, we still haven't seen it nearly enough consistently to get me banging on the door for him to be in USMNT camps. He didn't make my depth chart for the show we did last week. He's still got a ways to go. We need to see a lot of this stuff a lot more often. But this was one of the first moments from him, and I've watched, I think, all of his Dortmund tape. This is one of the first moments where he really flashes something at this level. You see it at the U19 level. You've seen it in the Dortmund system. You see it with the U20s, sometimes with the US. But this was a moment that made me think, okay, Cole Campbell is now maybe starting to push out of the, well, can he come on and just not be a net negative? Like, can he not turn the ball over? Can he keep up generally with the speed of play? Okay, he can do some of that stuff. Now, can he actually add? Like, is it worth having him on the soccer field if you're Borussia Dortmund? And I think the answer to that question is inching towards, emphasis on inching, it's going to take time, is inching towards yes. And that's a really, really good sign for Campbell. That is getting some minutes early on in the season is a plus. I would expect there will be more minutes coming for him off the bench in recent weeks, in upcoming weeks, Campbell's a guy that I am high on as a prospect, still just a prospect, but I am high on it. It was fun to see him make an impact over the weekend.
Joe, would you be in favour of him staying at Dortmund for the season, or would you think like a loan move would be beneficial at this point? Does that almost feel like running before he can walk?
No, there was the name of the team's escaping me, and I know listeners will know, and they'll be yelling angrily out into the world the name of this team. There was a deal for him to move away from Dortmund that seemed to be pretty far along in the summer, and he ends up deciding to stay at Dortmund. I think this is a fine place for him to be, right? I think maybe if he's getting some minutes and there's a team in January that has a clearer plan to giving him more minutes and maybe even starting minutes, that would be something worth considering. I think giving him another year of being in the Dortmund environment, maybe playing 800 minutes off the bench in the league. Dortmund also have Champions League games. There's other matches on their schedule. I think he will get a couple of starts across this season, and that's not a lightning quick progression. He's not a truly elite prospect, like globally in that sense as a winger. So I think it's unreasonable to expect him to jump into playing, 1,800 minutes this year and having 3 goals and 3 assists. I think that's off the table, but I think it is perfectly fine for him to stay at Dortmund through most of the season, all this season, and absorb a little bit more and get some spot minutes here and there.
There we go. Can also give a shout out to Chris Richards, who on Tuesday night scored what would have been the winner in the League Cup for Crystal Palace against Millwall. Sure, it was very scrappy from inside the 6, and sure it was against Championship Millwall, not very full strength side, but hey, congrats.
Goal's a goal.
Goal's a goal.
Especially for a centre-back. Can I mention another player who scored at the weekend? Someone who, like Richards, potentially a starting figure for the US at the World Cup. Ricardo Pepe scored his first goals of the season, got a brace for PSV against NEC Nijmegen at the weekend. First goal is a really nice swivel and finish from inside the box into the bottom corner. Second goal is a lovely header back across goal from across into the box. So 2 really nice goals. We've seemed to have highlighted a lot of scrappy goals and meaningless assists so far. So I'm going to highlight 2 nice goals here with Ricardo Pepe. I also saw some of his performance for PSV against Union SG, which I'm going to continue to call them Union SG, in the Champions League last night. Not a good result for PSV. They ended up losing that game 3-1 at home, which I don't think any of us called in our Patreon predictions episodes. So a big disappointment for them. But from what I saw of that game, I was actually quite impressed with like Pepe's all-round game. From what I saw of the game at the weekend as well, it was similar. He was doing a lot of work in that match to sort of link up play in the attack and drop deep and bounce off passes to teammates. And there was even a couple of times when he was the one picking the ball up from deep, like really deep, and then driving the ball forward and spraying it out, and then he would continue his run to sort of disrupt the opposition defence. He also won a good number of headers in the air. So yeah, both of them were, while the result for PSV against NEC was much better than the one against Union, and for Pepe, both of them seemed like good all-round centre-forward performances, which is encouraging, because I could have put him in the point to prove category, because while he's certainly not out of the picture for starting at the World Cup at the 9 spot, clearly Balogun has laid down a challenge with his last couple games, so Pepe needs to put up some numbers.
Graham, while we're covering some ground, did you watch Atleti get their 2-0 win this weekend?
Yes, some of that game, yes. At home to Villarreal, I did. Johnny was on the bench.
Should we be nervous about that fact that he's started their other games, which haven't been maybe as splendid as they would have liked, a loss and then 2 draws? The game he sits after the international break when he's not called in and feels like he had plenty of time to be with that team. He's on the bench and they win. I think it was Koke who comes in and replaces him.
We should be yes and no is the answer to that. So yes, because it feels like Atleti are already at the point where they want better ball players in central midfield. So it was Koke and Barrios who started that match from memory against Villarreal. So yes, that's concerning. No, because I think Johnny he's got some sort of injury. I don't think he's going to play any part in the Champions League this week against Liverpool. I think he's been left in Spain for that game, not just because he's out of the team, because he's not fit enough. So that might have been a factor in why he didn't play any role for Atleti at the weekend. But I still think, on the whole, Atleti are in enough competitions, they're fighting on enough fronts, that there should be a good amount of minutes for him, even if he is not like the all-round central midfielder that Atleti ideally need at this point.
There we go. Johnny Be Injured, that was the Chuck Berry's cousin released that one, I think. Back in the day.
Marvin Berry?
Marvin Berry, indeed. He had to hear it, and he heard it, and he heard the surname.
Man, another
wrong.
episode with a Back to the Future reference.
They just keep coming. Indeed. Great, Scott. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, a couple of your list of questions. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to USMNT Weekly. We go now to some listener questions. They Joe, seem to be based around our depth chart episode we did recently, and some feedback, shall we say.
Go on.
So, Nick Hartman has come in with this one. My question is simply, how dare you? How dare you list Josh Sargent after Brian White in your depth charts? Brian White has done less than nothing for the national team, and Josh Sargent was a bright spot in the most important game the US has played in the last 8 years. You can have your complaints about him, but the disrespect has gone way too far.
Less than nothing. Brian White, his handsomeness has offered enough.
Strong hair.
Yes.
I would say there's some chiseled features on Brian White's face. Thank you very much.
Often-esque.
I'm just going to start talking. I don't even want to be difficult here. I legit have no clue what game Nick is referencing. For Josh
Okay,
Sargent.
I thought I was like just having goldfish brain again. What do we think he's talking about?
I think it is the Iran game at the 2022 World Cup. But I had a similar thing where I'll have to take Nick's word for it, because I honestly can't remember Sargent's performance in that game. But he started that match at the World Cup, which obviously the US won to make the next.
Yeah. And Josh Sargent has done some good things to the U.S. Don't get me wrong. Nick, you could be well right that I have gone too far on the anti-Sargent agenda. I think Sargent, to say things that I've said before, even amidst all that, is a more talented soccer player than Brian White. He's not showing that with the national team right now. Like, he's just not engaged in the attack. He's actively hurting the defensive structure for reasons that I pointed out here. I pointed out over on Backheeled as well. Like, it has been a huge problem for the U.S. in the last 2 camps that Sargent has been in, and the last 2 games that he's played in for the U.S. men's national team. He's been not a zero. He's been a liability on the field for the U.S. in basically every phase. Brian White, and this is where I think, Nick, you and I would probably agree, he's basically been a zero on the field for the U.S., and he's not really a national team level player. The point that I'm trying to make is that this version of Josh Sargent that we've seen is worse than a zero. Like, he has been actively hurting the U.S.'s ability to play functional soccer. For me, that was reason enough in a silly depth chart episode to go in. And I assume there's some tongue-in-cheek in this question, too. Like, that, for me, that was reason enough to go ahead and continue the bit and just shine more light on how poor Sargent's been. Like, the good news for the U.S. is that none of this is going to matter. Like, Brian White's not going to play minutes at the World Cup. I don't imagine Josh Sargent's going to play minutes at the World Cup. It's going to be Folarin Balogun, and it's probably going to be Ricardo Pepi, assuming those guys are healthy. Maybe it'll be Big Pat, or maybe Sargent will sneak in as the third option. That's fine. I have no issue with Sargent being the third striker on a World Cup roster. I have simply been trying to point out through evidence and through repeated discussion of this topic, because it comes up a lot, that Sargent has been a capital P problem for the U.S., and Brian White hasn't. So for whatever that's worth, that's where I come from on this angle.
Yep, that's almost exactly where I am. It's basically, I was trying to construct my depth chart with an eye towards what we know or think we know about Pochettino and what he wants, combined with what we've observed from Poch and his selections, combined with what we understand of these players. And it's felt like Sargent has been given opportunities and has not done enough to impress and ensure that he can, or persuade us that he can be a mobile forward who does the things that are needed of a number 9 for the U.S. So that's why I dropped him down, because at least with Brian White, we know he's been a player that Poch has tried to call in and kept trying to call in. It seems like he's liked enough of what he's seen from him to continue to justify call-ups and squad inclusions, even if that doesn't translate to actual starting minutes or anything like it. It just seems like Sargent has fallen down the depth chart a bit. So that's why I had him ranked where I had him ranked.
All right. Any more justifications, or should we...
I mean, I didn't have Brian White in my top 5, and I did have Josh Sargent, so this isn't aimed at me.
All right.
But I agree with everything that's been said.
I had him in mind. It was just 6th behind
Okay.
Ajabang, White, Downs, and then Sargent.
Sure.
What's
would
controversial about that?
I think it's even clear that Mauricio Pochettino sees something in Josh Sargent. It's pretty clear to see he's a very well-rounded player in theory who can do a lot of really useful things on a soccer field. He is more talented than Brian White. And the fact that Poch continues to call Sargent into camps, even though he was part of the banned group temporarily in the summer, I think tells us that Poch sees that. We all see that, right? That's not difficult to pick up when you watch Josh Sargent play. There's a reason why he's gone and played in the Bundesliga and some other leagues in Europe, and Brian White hasn't, right? I don't think it's hard to see that. I don't think it's difficult in any way. The problem is just that Sargent isn't playing well with the national team. He doesn't seem to be bothered, or it's something about it. It's difficult for him. I don't know what that is, but I don't know how you can come away from watching Sargent against Panama back in March and against South Korea earlier this month and think that he needs to be there, or he even needs to be above almost any other able-bodied, relatively competent striker in the pool. That just doesn't make sense to me.
And that South Korea game was particularly damning, even though it was a friendly, because we had the A/B test, right, with Balogun coming on and making an impact, or doing more at least in a matter of minutes than Sargent had done in the game. So, yeah, I think it's fair to say that Sargent's stock is down with the national team. That's not to say that he might well be a better player than a lot of the players I had ahead of him in my list. It's just that's not how you construct or build a soccer team, right? Or a group of players. It's about how they fit in with each other, and we've got enough evidence now to say somewhere along the line for the USMNT it's just not working for Sargent.
Yeah, I think Graham nailed it there, and I would extend that with the idea that he is probably a very good player, certainly a very good player for Norwich. He doesn't seem to do or fit well when tasked with doing what Pochettino needs him to do for the U.S. And I don't think at the same time he's at a level where that is necessarily a problem. I think there are certain players who, if they were on the outside looking in because they weren't looking as sharp in the system or they didn't do exactly what was asked, then it does become more of a managerial issue. If Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie and Christian Pulisic all are suddenly surplus to requirement, I've got some questions. But I don't think Sargent is at a level where you have to kind of adjust the team to fit him in and make something happen. And so he might be better when playing for Norwich than any of the other strikers would be, but playing for the U.S., I just have him down the depth chart right now.
All right. I hope that answers your question, Nick Hartman. One more question here from Paul Nichols. After your USMNT depth chart episode, were there any omissions that surprised you? Maybe players you ranked 6 out of 5? Maybe we'll get there. Players who in this cycle you thought could have raised their profile and made this list but didn't. Jesus Ferreira is Paul Nichols' pick.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
I mean, it's a good shout. I wouldn't say I was surprised that Ferreira wasn't in our depth chart because he hasn't been in the picture for a while, hasn't had a great season, and also we speak about the national team at least once a week. I know how each of us feels about basically every player in the pool and could have predicted who would be in each of our top 5s, and so I knew that Ferreira wouldn't really be in there. But if you told me at the last World Cup that Ferreira would be so far out of the picture in 2025, then yeah, I probably would have been a bit surprised at that, because I always liked his profile for the US, especially in a team where the attacking quality possibly comes from the wide areas more than the 9 and from attacking midfield. Ferreira just felt like a good option to get the best out of those players. He's a bit of a facilitator, right? A bit of a sort of at a much lower level, a bit of a sort of Firmino figure in that front line, and so I liked having him as an option. But at some point, that each of these players in this pool needs to perform right on a regular and consistent basis for club level first, and I guess that just hasn't really happened for Ferreira this year, so he's out of the picture.
Fair enough. Joe, a name that hasn't come up in a long time, Gianluca Busio. Does he get anywhere near any of these depth charts, do we think?
Nope. I don't think so. I think really the Busio moment was a fun one. It was a fleeting one, and I don't think that he's really justified any of that. I went a different direction on my list. I want to start with a player that came up earlier in the episode, that I brought up earlier in the episode, Yunus Musa. I thought Yunus Musa could be in a really, really good spot heading into the 2026 World Cup. Let's take ourselves back in the time machine and go back to right before the 2022 World Cup, where it's the Winter World Cup. Musa's playing with Valencia. He goes from Valencia to the World Cup, and then eventually at the end of that season moves to Milan the next season. Seemed like he could really progress there. Just didn't. Like, it has been a standstill for Musa effectively since the World Cup. Maybe even a bit of a regression. He's trying to find his footing, and we did the whole thing on him earlier, so I don't need to do it now. But Musa felt like a guy who, if he added just a little bit of passing to his game, could be the best center mid in the pool, and that just hasn't happened. So that's been a little bit of, not a total shock, but it has been a surprise to me that we haven't really seen any forward progress from Musa. The other name that came to mind for me here of a player who I thought could really raise his stock in this cycle is Luca Koleosho, who is now back at Espanyol after unproductive minutes at Burnley. This was always still a speculative pick. Like, I was way more surprised by Musa than I am by Koleosho. Koleosho, he was raw, even when we first started talking about him as a multinational with the U.S. And where would he play? Would he choose to play for the U.S. or Canada? Where he'd been in all these things. He just hasn't progressed either. His game was still super raw. He doesn't have a lot of flair and finesse in the final third. He is still mostly a straight line runner with a little bit of ability to use both feet, but just hasn't progressed his game. And that has been, again, not a total shock to me, but it felt like he was a player that could break into the team, especially in a real position of need for the U.S., where winger is not a strength for this group at all. But that just hasn't happened. So Koleosho and Musa were the two that came to mind for me here.
Okay. Taylor?
Did any of us have, sorry to jump in, did any of us have Brendan Aronson on anywhere in our depth chart?
I thought you were going to say a different one.
And I know Joe didn't.
I didn't. I probably should have, because I did feel like he was one who, probably this time last year, I felt like he was unfairly maligned, and I thought we were kind of dismissing the level he was playing at, or aspired to be playing at, since he kept kind of bouncing around. And I thought, was a reliable, hardworking player. I think it was this summer, and seeing how much he just didn't fit in with the team is why I'm not surprised he's not here. But yeah, I think given that a year ago I would have probably selected him and had him starting in my 11. That's probably a good shout. What I thought you were going to say, Graham, is a player that I think you drafted when we did our, if we're each trying to assemble our best possible U.S. starting 11s, but we did it in a draft. So, I think I'm correct in saying that I took Ricardo Pepi. I think Joe had Florin Balogun. Graham, I believe your starting striker was a certain Brandon Vasquez. And that is a name that I thought was going to kind of, catch fire, catch on, keep moving, right? And keep developing. That was when he moved to Liga MX. That does not work out. He moves back to Major League Soccer. Joe, how's that gone so far?
Really, really good. I mean, it could have been better for him, right? The ACL has sidelined him more than just about anything else this season.
Yeah. So
that and Austin's bad roster build, both of those things.
Just a couple things. So, but I think that was a player that I thought could be challenging for minutes, could be a potential starter at the number 9 position, and is no longer he's probably 9th on the depth chart now. He's behind Josh Sargent, if that makes anybody happy. Maybe Gerald D.
messages from the Brandon Vasquez stands now next week. How dare you?
It's at Brandon Vasquez's dad on Twitter. And then the only other one, I think I wasn't really expecting him to ever be a starter for the U.S. I don't think I was really expecting him to catch fire and move up to the Premier League. But I had hopes that Daryl Dike would maybe one day stay healthy and remind us all why there was the hype and excitement around him. That hasn't really come to pass. He was injured for that West Brom game that was mentioned earlier. I don't really know what's going to happen with him long term. I think he's out of contract at the end of this season. But he was one who I at least had hopes for and thought maybe could be a spark, but doesn't feel like we're going in that direction. So I feel like number 9 was the area that I had a lot of hopes for that didn't come to fruition.
All right. Good stuff. Paul Nichols, thank you very much indeed for your question, which concludes this here episode of USMNT Weekly. Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much for your contributions, and once more, how dare you?
That is fair. I think in my starting 11, I also had Leonard Maloney as a center back and Austin Trusty as the other center back. So what's up?
Yeah. Graham Muffin, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey. Trusty season is over. It was one season, and now we're back to normality for poor old Austin.
That was a giant sigh of an outro from you there, Graham.
It was. I was excited there for a moment that we might have a start in World Cup centre-back pairing, and now we don't even have one in the roster. So there we go.
Bless. Joe Lowry, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Ryan.
And thank you again, listener, for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed before you know it. But for now, bye.